All right, let's build a bullseye pick. All right, welcome back to the channel, everybody. On this episode, we're going to build us a bullseye pick. Now, bullseye pick is a very handy tool when you're trying to just get those little minute lows to come up in a piece of sheet metal when you're fixing some dents or you've done some welding on a panel. I've never personally used one. I don't own one, so that's why we are building this. But I've always wanted one, and occasionally I know they would have come in handy to have one versus trying to reach and hammer and dolly a lot. This will get those little fine places up so you get a little more precise without having to use all hand-eye coordination. So what we've got laid out on the table here is, first off, we've got some 1/2-inch chromoly tubing, 058 wall. I've got two sections of it here. I've got your basic kind of a hand bender to make our bends in the tubing. Now, as far as the design itself, it's basically copied off every other design that's out there for a bullseye pick. I took some TIG wire, some 3/32 TIG wire, and basically kind of roughly laid out what I want and the size. Now we're looking at, it's going to be roughly 24 inches deep and about 10 inches tall. So that'll fit a lot of stuff when we're trying to get around some of these, like a roof rail or something. Probably won't be able to get inside of like a trunk into a quarter panel, but I'm not too concerned with that. We're going to use this thing when we need it, and then probably not going to need it a whole lot. Now, to build it, like I say, we're using the 3/32 rod as our little guide for our design. Now, starting with the bottom section, you'll notice here it comes straight up at a 90-degree fashion. I've got a 3/8 bolt laid out here. This 3/8 bolt, we're actually going to cut the head off of this, and we're going to sharpen this to our point, because this is going to be the point that's actually lifting the little spots of metal, just like you're tapping it with a little sharp hammer. Same principle. So we're going to end up welding a nut to the tip of the tube here, and then we'll cut the head off of this. And that way we can also make any other type of tip we want. So I can have a sharp one. If I wanted to put like a little washer on the end and make a little round head. We could do multiple things in this manner. So that's going to get there. I've got an old, just a tab for a car. It's a 1/2-inch hole there and radius for, I think, a 1.5-inch tubing or 1 5/8. But we're going to take this and we're going to turn this into more of a V shape, and that'll kind of create essentially our little bullseye so that we know where we're actually hitting it from the bottom. So this is just going to be important to let us know where we're tapping on it, and it'll give that little bit of down pressure on there as it's swinging up and catching the metal. So now, as far as the top frame is concerned, I've basically just got a straight piece. We're going to bend it at about a 45, and not really sure that's necessary. We could probably turn this as a 90, but we're just going to do a 45. It'll take a little less material because you can see we don't have a whole lot of material to work with. And as we get back to the back here, it needs to pivot. So we're just going to use some 3/8 washers. These are going to make our little brackets for our pivot and a 3/8 bolt. So right here in this corner. And then we're going to turn the back of this. This may not be the exact angle we need, but then we've got a couple more tabs and a spring. Because what we want to do is we want this thing to stay open when we're not using it. That way when we squeeze it right here, this will be our handle. When we squeeze these two pieces together, it'll actually function, and then it'll spring back off of itself. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, since this is the shortest piece here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to bend that up. We're going to use the shorter section we have here. As you can see, we've got just about enough to do it with. So we're going to go ahead and make this bend. I'm probably going to make this about a 45-degree bend here. And then we're going to leave this section straight at the moment. We can bend that later once we figure out how much of an angle we need to come off of here to attach our return springs. All right, 45-degree bend. All right, so you can see here I've got about I've got this thing set up for about 5 inches from the base to the tip, to where we're going to be mounting the bolt in. Now I can always get a longer bolt or whatever I need to add in there. So the tube bender is an 1.5 inch radius bender. So that's going to be a 3-inch circle if you were to do a complete circle. So what I'm going to do, we're showing 5 inches from the top here to there. I'm going to mark it at about 3.5 inches. That's where I'm going to start my bend, because I imagine that's what it's going to take to create a gentle sweep here to get that 5 inches of height. All right, so mark 3.5 inches down. This one's going to be a 90-degree bend. Too much. A little too much. All right, close enough. All right, so we landed really close to where we need to be, given that maybe this is going to be the bottom. So can always take a little bit off of that if I need to, so no big deal. So now we're going to mark out this end here, and we're going to go ahead and make our other 2 bends, and then we'll cut off our excess that's out here when we get to that stage. All right, so don't forget, when you're doing complicated bends, you need to actually measure the angle, keep everything flat. So back to the trusty little digital one. We'll zero it out right here on our actual die, and then we just have to zero this end. All right, so I've already got we've got these 2 pieces made. I went ahead and cut off about 6 inches or so of this because it was too much. It was interfering with what's going on here. Next thing I'm going to do, we're going to go ahead and weld this nut in, and we can go ahead and cut and sharpen the tip of this. And then we're going to go ahead and V-notch this, and then cut the end of this. We're going to make this pretty close to parallel with this back piece. So it's going to be something like that. But I'm just going to go ahead and tack that in for now, because we need to get these figured out how we're going to exactly where these things are going to be meeting essentially. And what we may have to do is take this over 90 a little bit, which will be fine because we're going to need a little squeezing room anyway. And then we need to determine our bend back here once we get the back end here welded together with some with a pivot. Alright, so I've got one little tab right here welded on. I've got my bolt in place just to coarse thread them for now for quick, simple stuff. Put a regular bolt back in instead of the one that's going to be getting sharpened. I need something to guide this to where it needs to be. So, holding that right there. Alright, now that we got that welded in, it's time to make our spring piece in the rear. So, alright, so I got the bullseye pick finished up. Had to make a couple little adjustments in the back here. I changed to a stronger spring and moved this tab down a little bit to give it a little more pressure on it so it will return a lot better. The bolt here, I've gone ahead and sharpened it to a point so it acts just like a pick hammer on the bottom. It is raw at the moment. I cleaned it up a little bit, but it does need a little bit of paint probably just to keep it from rusting or anything. So, all right, so now that we got the bullseye pick made, I figured we got to give it a try, right? So what I did was I scrounged around the work there. We got an old Mustang cowl panel here. It's a little rotted out. It was cheaper just to buy and replace it than try to fix it. So I've made a little dent over here. I've got a little bit of black spray paint on it just to work as a guide code so you can see what's going on. So I'm going to sand that off so we can find that low spot, and then we're going to try this thing out and see if it actually works. Alright, so we got a low spot right here. We're going to do a little sanding on it. Pretty easy to see right there. You see right here where this thing, that dark area, that's where it's still low. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to begin to tap up on this thing, and we'll keep working that sandpaper on it, and so we can visualize what we're actually doing. All right, so like I was saying, right here at this horizontal, where this horizontal edge is where you're going to be, where this is actually going to be tapping. So that's our aim point right there in between. So we'll start in that lowest area there. You can see a lot of these little shiny spots here. So you can see these little shiny spots right there where I've been playing with this thing. That's where we're having, where it's high, where we're picking it up and the sandpaper is now cutting off the top, and all our darker areas are still low. It's already, you can see we don't have quite as much black here. It feels really good. We could technically, you know, we could prime this and a little tiny bit of body filler, but hopefully you can see that thing is really, really close with just a few minutes of work. I mean, you gotta imagine if you're out there trying to reach out over a roof or a long hood or a panel like that and trying to get some stuff done, that'd be a great help, man, because you can just, you know, aim and go from one side without having to hand-eye coordinate on both sides. Alright, so of course this is a paint channel. This is Paint by Curry, so we had to paint this thing. Had a little bit of some scarlet red left over, so went ahead and shot that on there with a little bit of EC 5700 to make it nice and shiny. I think it turned out pretty good. Everything is nice and tight as it should. Put a little lube underneath the washers here so I can get this bolt a little tighter, help keep a little bit of that sway out of it. And like I say, it's a little forgiving because of the chromoly tubing, but seems to work pretty good. I took another bolt and kind of rounded off the head on it just a little bit there so I can swap this out so I can get a little bit larger area, a little bit larger of a hit instead of being so precise like this one here is. But yeah, you can see me was painting this thing when I was actually finishing up that planishing hammer, so knocked them both out while I was at it. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you learned a little something. If you did, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and tap that bell, and I'll catch you on the next one.